I've found anime's greatest villain. Well, actually, I found 4 of them. I believe these 4 characters perfectly exemplify what makes antagonists and villains great. So we'll be doing a dive into each one to decipher precisely why they stand above the sea of mediocre anime villains. And we'll be getting started with one of my personal favorites, Meruem. When it comes to creating a good villain or good characters in general, there are 2 main aspects that make said character interesting: their motives and their character development. Meruem excels in the second category. He's often regarded as the best antagonist of Hunter x Hunter and one of the best antagonists of anime as a whole. And this is largely because of his character development. He goes through an incredible development, from a single track force of evil that was willing to sacrifice disobedient subordinates and murder and eat children, to a morally neutral being who found companionship in the exact people he used to prey on, while still putting the needs of his species first. The vast majority of Meruem's development can be attributed to Komugi, as she unintentionally teaches him about some of the core aspects of humanity. She teaches him about love and loss through Kokoriko. She teaches him about the fragility of the human body in general, and our desire to be with someone as their desire to be together grows. She also helps him develop his enjoyment of being challenged, and speaks to the importance of family and support in our world. She is the one that gives Meruem the desire to learn his own name, and gives him a new view of the human selection process as well as a new definition of strength. She does a ton for him, and most of it is not even intentional, but we can't give her all the credit. Obviously, Meruem deserves some credit here too for actually having the emotional intelligence to develop empathy, which is honestly a rare trait in antagonists. Like, so few of them have any amount of emotional intelligence. Really makes you wonder how some of these stories could be different if they had some. Part of what makes Meruem such an interesting character is his untapped potential for growth. As the pinnacle of the Chimera ants, Meruem is pretty much the theoretical limit of human-based evolution. This gave him the ability to learn and adapt unlike any other character in the series, which really let Togashi run wild and do what he wanted to do with this character. And I think that is a huge part of why he's such a great antagonist. Another major part is his progression compared to Gon's progression over the arc. These two are some of the best examples of contrary character growth. The monster's ant becoming human while the human becomes the monster. This inversion of morals also helps to emphasize the overall message of the arc, which of course is that humans are worse than the ants we look down on, and that our atrocities are way more savage than anything that exists in nature. It's a message that is clearly echoed in Meruem's design. While not as clear in the anime, the illustration of the manga makes it pretty clear that Meruem is heavily inspired by child soldiers. His childlike face and shorter stature paired with the obvious combat gear integrated into his body. But that's a discussion for another day. Meruem is one of the characters that best exemplifies character development in an antagonist. But when it comes to motive, I don't think he really excels. Don't get me wrong, his motives aren't bad, but compared to his character development, they're not quite as fleshed out. They can't really keep up with characters that have great motives. Characters like Griffith. The dream. The main motivation for both Griffith and Guts through the first half of Berserk. It stands as the philosophical center of the entire manga, and the center of the story itself through the eclipse. The quest for the castle and Guts' decision to find his own dream pushed the band of the Hawk to their doom. Not that Guts is directly responsible. Griffith is the prime example of an antagonist who has excellent motives. They are deep, meaningful, and persuasive, and they are the reason behind some of the best scenes in the entire manga. I personally am a huge fan of the fountain scene, which focuses on a man's dream and what it means to be a friend. As I said earlier, Griffith's dream is the full driving force behind the Band of the Hawk, but it's also a lot more than that. It is a strong and relatable motive. The idea that every man has to at least attempt to do something great is inspiring, while the possibility of your dream getting trampled for another's is frightening. It inspires both out of the draw for greatness and the fear of failure. It's hard to do both with one idea. I'm pretty sure this ideal originates from Nietzsche, but I'm not a philosopher, so I can't fully speak on the philosophical implications of this ideal, but this idea has affected me personally. It's changed what I put my time into and how I conduct myself in general. Griffith's belief of what a friend is has also had a profound effect on me. For so long, I had viewed friends as just people that I enjoy being around. Whether they were doing better than me in life or worse than me in life didn't really matter, and that has somewhat changed thanks to Griffith, but not quite to his beliefs. I think seeing a friend as an equal is less about finding someone that is your direct equal, and more about uplifting someone to your status or raising yourself to the status of the peers you want to call your friends. That's what being a friend is all about, pushing yourself and the people you want to be around to be the best people possible. Now, I know, what do my personal feelings about friends have to do with Griffith as a character? Well, I think it takes a really special ideal and belief to inspire this depth of thought. I'm not going to re-evaluate what a friend is by watching Tanjiro get a flashback for the 10th time, or by watching Bakugo bully Deku for the 100th time, but I will after reading Berserk. Griffith shows us that the repetition of a theme does not make the theme stronger. The idea of a friend is only brought up a handful of times before the eclipse, but just in the development of our two protagonists, that word develops so much. Even if Griffith doesn't. I could probably make a whole video about Griffith, to be honest, but it wouldn't be as good as the ones that are already out there, and I don't think I can say anything that has already been said, so I won't do it. Unless you really want it, in which case let me know in the comments down below. Also, it's worth noting that I do think Griffith did a lot wrong. But before you can get angry, I'm going to move on to our next person, which is Mahito. Mahito is probably the most villainous of the people we're talking about today. He is very, very evil because he just loves to cause suffering. That's pretty much the definition of a villain. He's one of the most hated characters in Jujutsu Kaisen thanks to his actions, and this just further emphasizes his effectiveness as a villain. Honestly, I think part of what makes Mahito stand out to me is that Jujutsu Kaisen just doesn't have a lot of good antagonists. None of them are bad, but besides Mahito, they all just feel a little bit one-dimensional. Mahito, on the other hand, feels interesting. He has clear inspiration and clear complexity. His inspiration is clearly Frankenstein with his patchwork skin, and he has pretty unique character development. Unlike a lot of characters, his personality doesn't really change. He's hated humans since his inception, but at the same time, he's always in pursuit of finding his truest self. He evolves via his curse technique, which we watch develop from a simple interpretation of the soul to more and more complex creations. It's a really interesting way to develop a villain, and it contrasts very well with Yuji. That's the other part of why I love Mahito. He's a perfect antithesis to Yuji, a natural good born into the world of Jujutsu paired with a natural evil born into the same world. They were literally created to be rivals. The motif of Mahito calling Yuji his natural enemy does not just refer to the surface level description of Yuji's immunity to Mahito's ability. It also stands as a moral statement. Through Shibuya, Yuji symbolizes the goodness and idealism of humanity. He is everything the curses want to ignore when they talk about their desires to replace humans. While they focus on the lies and flaws of humanity, Yuji stands as a beacon of what the species could have been and what it should still strive to be. Hardworking, honest, and nice. Yuji is the best kind of person, making him among the worst to practice Jujutsu. This drives Mahito's hunger to grow. He wants to grow to prove that Yuji's symbolism means nothing, and he pushes Yuji so far just to try to prove that his ideals are nothing more than a front, that in reality he is just another shitty human. And he of course does this by killing almost everyone Yuji cares about. Mahito is also interesting because we see him from his very birth. When introduced, he is an incredibly young cursed spirit, and even though he doesn't get to live very long, the time that he did live was obviously impactful. It's rare to see literally the entire life of a character, so it was really nice to see it with Mahito. We have one last character I want to talk about today, but it is a major Chainsaw Man spoiler, so consider this your spoiler warning. Let's talk about Makima. Where do I even begin? If Griffith is the most philosophically interesting antagonist, then Makima is probably the most psychologically interesting. The way she's still willing to care for humans despite seeing them as less than her isn't a super common trope, at least not in the way she does it. Meruem is an example of someone that saw humans as less than himself, not that he was really wrong, but unlike Makima, he just wanted to kill them first. Makima, on the other hand, wants to treat them closer to dogs, as she doesn't view humans as being on the same level as her, but she still wants to do nice things for them. This combination of superiority and niceness is not common in villains, as most just do heinous things to prove they're evil. That's not to say Makima didn't do some messed up stuff, because she did, and she did a lot, all for fulfilling her master plan to get Denji to submit to her so she could control Chainsaw Man. I think Makima is a great execution of the big bad villain trope. When I say big bad villain trope, I'm talking about the trope of a mastermind or super powerful antagonist that, for the most part, only exists in the shadows until the final battle. These are characters like Firelord Ozai, Muzan, or Sukuna. A lot of the time, these characters feel a bit underwhelming. They don't get the screen time a lot of other villains get because they're just in the shadows being evil, which limits their growth and their connection to the viewers. Makima does this trope well because she's not quite in the background, but still fills the role of the big bad guy very well. This kind of balancing act is super hard to pull off, and doing so while keeping the audience guessing about Makima and her evil ways is even harder to do. Yet despite being a vile villain, she has one of the most poignant and human scenes in the entire series. That is, the cry at the movies. For me, this was the moment that I knew Chainsaw Man had the potential to be great. Just a one-shot chapter about the movie-going experience and the search for something special. It is a great moment in the series, and it gives Makima a lot of depth as it is the first time that we see any real emotion out of her. It shows us that despite her demeanor, she still finds value in trivial human experiences. The experiences that make humans humans are experiences she also has. Obviously, this is before it's even clear that she is a devil, but I think the reveal that she is one makes this moment even better. It makes her one of the more human characters despite not even being human. Makima also has the advantage of being one of the few characters in Chainsaw Man that doesn't die in like 20 chapters, so she gets as much development and screen time as the protagonists, if not more. She is my favorite character from Chainsaw Man and one of my characters in anime manga in general, and a lot of that comes from the fact that she's a great villain. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, please consider subscribing. It's one of the best ways you can support the channel, aside from watching another video or direct monetary support via a membership, but no pressure on that one. Thank you so much for watching. It really does mean a ton to me, and I'll see you again next week for another video.